There's a terror that grips us when the world finally grows quiet, when the last notification fades, when the final conversation ends, when we're left with nothing but the sound of our own breathing. We tell ourselves we fear being alone, that we need the warmth of human connection, the comfort of familiar voices. But that's not the whole truth, is it? What we really fear isn't the absence of others. What terrifies us is the presence of ourselves, the unfiltered, unedited, undistracted encounter with who we actually are beneath all the masks, performances, and carefully constructed identities we present to the world. Because in those moments of true solitude, when there's nowhere left to hide, we're forced to confront a question that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Who am I when no one is watching? This terror runs so deep that we've built an entire civilization around avoiding it. We've created endless ways to stay busy, connected, validated, stimulated. We check our phones compulsively, fill every silence with sound, schedule ourselves into exhaustion, and surround ourselves with people who reflect back the version of ourselves we want to believe is real. But occasionally, in spite of all our defenses, the masks slip. In the gap between sleeping and waking, in the silence after a breakup, in the emptiness of a Sunday afternoon, in the space between one distraction and the next, something emerges. A presence we've been running from, a voice we've been trying to silence, a self we've been afraid to meet. Today, we're going to explore why this encounter feels so dangerous, why we've learned to fear our own company more than almost anything else, and what becomes possible when we finally find the courage to stop running. Because the irony is this: the very thing we're most afraid of facing is also the source of everything we're actually looking for. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote that hell is other people, but he was only half right. Hell is not other people. Hell is needing other people to tell you who you are. Hell is living your entire life as a stranger to yourself. Hell is dying without ever having met the person you actually were, beneath all the expectations, conditioning, and borrowed dreams. If you've ever felt that creeping panic when faced with an empty schedule, if you've ever filled silence with meaningless noise just to avoid hearing your own thoughts, if you've ever felt more lonely in a crowd than you do in actual solitude, then this message is for you. Because what you're experiencing isn't weakness, it's the beginning of awakening. Are you ready to discover what you're really afraid of? Are you prepared to understand why the journey inward feels so much more terrifying than any external adventure? Then stay with me, because we're about to explore the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with yourself. The masks we wear. From the moment we're born, we begin learning how to be acceptable. We quickly discover that certain expressions of ourselves are welcomed while others are met with disapproval, correction, or rejection. The authentic impulses of childhood, the raw honesty, the unfiltered emotions, the spontaneous creativity, gradually get shaped, molded, and often suppressed in service of becoming someone others can tolerate. This process isn't malicious. Parents, teachers, and society aren't consciously trying to destroy our authentic selves. They're trying to help us survive and succeed in a world that has its own rules, expectations, and demands. But in learning to fit in, something essential often gets lost: the connection to our own inner truth. We develop what psychologists call personas, the masks we wear in different social situations. There's the professional self, the family self, the social self, the romantic self, each one carefully crafted to meet the expectations of its particular audience. Over time, these personas become so familiar that we forget they're masks at all. The tragedy is that we become so skilled at being what others need us to be that we lose touch with what we actually are. We learn to read rooms instead of reading ourselves. We become experts at external validation while remaining beginners at internal knowing. We develop elaborate strategies for being liked while forgetting how to like ourselves. This is why solitude feels so threatening. When we're alone, the audience disappears. There's no one to perform for, no one to impress, no one to convince. The carefully maintained personas have no purpose, and in that absence of external definition, we're faced with the terrifying question: without my roles, my relationships, my reputation, who am I? Many people discover, to their horror, that they don't know. Years of focusing on external achievement and social navigation have left their inner landscape unmapped, unexplored, foreign. They've become successful strangers to themselves, accomplished in the world, but lost within their own minds. This disconnection manifests in countless ways. The successful executive who feels empty despite professional achievements. The popular person who feels lonely even when surrounded by friends. The people pleaser who has lost touch with their own desires. The perfectionist who never feels good enough because they're measuring themselves against impossible standards. The masks we wear aren't inherently problematic. We all need social skills and situational awareness. The problem arises when the masks become more real to us than the face underneath. When we've worn them so long that we've forgotten what our authentic expression looks like. When we fear that beneath all the personas, there might be nothing substantial at all. This fear drives us into increasingly elaborate forms of self-avoidance. We stay busy to avoid stillness. We seek constant stimulation to avoid silence. We surround ourselves with people to avoid being alone with our own thoughts. We consume endless content to avoid producing our own insights. We live reactive lives to avoid the responsibility of conscious choice. But the masks are beginning to crack. In quiet moments late at night between activities, we catch glimpses of something underneath. A voice that sounds different from the ones we use in public. Thoughts that don't match our carefully curated self-image. Desires that contradict our supposed values. Fears that reveal the gaps in our confident facade. And this is when the real fear begins. Not the fear of being alone, but the fear of who we might discover ourselves to be when all the external props are removed. The fear that we might not like what we find. The fear that others might not like it either. The fear that our authentic self might be unacceptable, unlovable, or simply unremarkable. The prison of other people's opinions. One of the deepest sources of our fear of solitude is our addiction to external validation. We've become so dependent on other people's opinions to define our worth that the prospect of existing without constant feedback feels like psychological death. We need others to tell us we're smart, attractive, valuable, important. Without this steady stream of external confirmation, we begin to doubt our very existence. This addiction doesn't develop overnight. It's carefully cultivated from childhood through a system of rewards and punishments that teaches us to value external approval over internal knowing. We learn to celebrate when others are proud of us and to feel shame when we disappoint them. Our sense of self becomes a fragile construction built entirely from other people's reactions. Social media has weaponized this psychological vulnerability on an unprecedented scale. Every post becomes a plea for validation, every photo a request for approval, every update an attempt to convince others and ourselves that our lives have meaning and value. The number of likes, comments, and shares becomes a quantified measure of our worth as human beings. But this external validation is like a drug. It provides temporary relief, but requires ever-increasing doses to maintain the same effect. Each hit of approval creates a momentary high, followed by the inevitable crash when the attention fades. We become trapped in endless cycles of performing, posting, and pursuing the next fix of external confirmation. The cruel irony is that the more we depend on others for validation, the less authentic we become. We start crafting our lives around what will impress others rather than what actually fulfills us. We choose careers that sound good at parties rather than work that feeds our souls. We pursue relationships that look good on paper rather than connections that nourish our hearts. This external focus creates a fundamental split in our experience. There's the public self, the carefully curated version we present to the world, and the private self, the messy, complicated, uncertain person we actually are. The greater the gap between these two selves, the more exhausting it becomes to maintain the facade. When we're alone, this performance becomes impossible to maintain. There's no audience to impress, no validation to receive, no external confirmation of our worth. We're left with only our own judgment, and for many people, this is the most critical judge of all. We've become so accustomed to seeing ourselves through others' eyes that we've lost the ability to see ourselves through our own. This is why solitude can feel like exile. Without the steady stream of external feedback, we begin to question everything about ourselves. Are we still valuable if no one is watching? Do we still matter if no one is acknowledging our existence? Are we still real if no one is validating our experience? The fear of being alone with ourselves is often really the fear of discovering that we don't actually like our own company. We're afraid we might be boring, depressing, anxious, or empty. We're terrified that without the distraction of others, we might have to confront the reality that we've been living someone else's life while neglecting our own. Breaking free from this prison requires developing what psychologists call internal locus of control, the ability to validate yourself from within rather than constantly seeking approval from without. It means learning to trust your own judgment, to value your own opinion, to find worth in your own experience regardless of whether others recognize or appreciate it. This shift is terrifying because it means taking full responsibility for your own happiness, your own meaning, your own sense of worth. It means giving up the comfortable illusion that others can provide these things for you. It means facing the truth that you are the only person who can truly know and validate your authentic experience. But it's also liberating beyond measure. When you stop needing others to tell you who you are, you become free to discover it for yourself. When you stop performing for external approval, you can begin living for internal fulfillment. When you stop fearing other people's judgments, you can start trusting your own wisdom. The stranger in the mirror. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery we make when we finally sit in solitude is that we don't actually know ourselves very well. We've spent so much time focused on external achievements, relationships, and responsibilities that our inner landscape has become foreign territory. We're like tourists in our own minds, uncertain about the thoughts we think, the feelings we feel, and the desires we carry. This self-alienation runs deeper than we often realize. We know our social security number, but not our deepest values. We can recite our professional accomplishments, but struggle to name what brings us genuine joy. We have detailed knowledge of our friends' lives, but remain mysteries to ourselves. When we're forced into solitude by circumstance, choice, or crisis, we often meet this stranger in the mirror with a mixture of fascination and horror. Who is this person who thinks these thoughts? Where do these emotions come from? What do these desires mean? The discovery that we don't know ourselves as well as we thought can be profoundly disorienting. Many people describe feeling like they're meeting themselves for the first time in midlife. After decades of following prescribed paths, meeting others' expectations, and playing expected roles, they suddenly find themselves asking, what do I actually want? What do I really believe? Who am I when I'm not trying to be someone else? This inner stranger often carries voices, opinions, and impulses that don't match our self-concept. The people pleaser discovers anger. The rational person finds deep emotional currents. The confident public figure meets inner insecurity. The helper realizes they need help. These contradictions can feel threatening because they challenge the simple, coherent identity we've constructed. Carl Jung called this hidden aspect of ourselves the shadow, all the parts of our personality that we've rejected, denied, or never developed because they didn't fit our self-image or social expectations. The shadow contains not just our negative qualities, but also our unrealized potential, our suppressed creativity, our authentic power. Meeting our shadow in solitude can be deeply uncomfortable because it forces us to accept our own complexity. We discover that we're not the simple, consistent person we thought we were. We're multifaceted, contradictory, constantly changing. We contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman wrote, and this multiplicity can feel chaotic when we're accustomed to presenting a unified front to the world. But this discovery is also liberating. When we stop trying to be perfect and start accepting our complexity, we become more human, more real, more integrated. We can acknowledge our flaws without being defined by them. We can embrace our contradictions without being paralyzed by them. We can own our full humanity instead of settling for partial authenticity. The process of getting to know ourselves requires patience and compassion. We need to approach our inner stranger with the same curiosity and kindness we'd show to any new acquaintance. This means listening without judgment, observing without criticism, and accepting without conditions. It also requires time, something our culture seems designed to eliminate. Self-knowledge doesn't happen in the gaps between activities or during brief meditation sessions. It requires sustained attention, prolonged silence, and the willingness to sit with uncertainty while our authentic self slowly reveals itself. Many people are afraid of what they might discover in this process. What if I'm not who I thought I was? What if my authentic self is unacceptable to others? What if my real desires conflict with my commitments? What if I've been living the wrong life entirely? These fears are understandable, but misguided. The authentic self isn't some fixed entity waiting to be discovered. It's an ongoing creation, a continuous becoming. Getting to know yourself doesn't mean uncovering some predetermined destiny. It means learning to live more consciously, more intentionally, more aligned with your evolving truth. The stranger in the mirror isn't your enemy. It's your most important relationship. Learning to befriend this person, to understand their complexity, to appreciate their uniqueness, is the foundation of all other relationships. You can't truly love others until you've learned to love yourself. And you can't love yourself until you've taken the time to actually know who you are. The addiction to distraction. We live in what might be the most distracted era in human history. Every device in our environment is designed to capture and hold our attention. Every app is optimized to create habitual engagement. Every platform promises connection, entertainment, or information, but delivers it in ways that make sustained focus nearly impossible. This constant stimulation serves a psychological function beyond mere entertainment. It helps us avoid confronting ourselves. When our minds are always occupied with external input, we never have to face the internal questions, emotions, or uncertainties that arise in stillness. Distraction becomes a form of emotional anesthesia. The addiction to distraction is so pervasive that most people can't tolerate even a few minutes of unstimulated consciousness. Studies show that many people would rather give themselves electric shocks than sit alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. We've become so uncomfortable with our own mental activity that we prefer physical pain to psychological presence. This avoidance pattern extends far beyond digital devices. We fill every moment with activities, conversations, consumption, or planning. We listen to podcasts while walking, music while working, television while eating. We've eliminated almost every opportunity for unstructured contemplation from our daily lives. But what exactly are we avoiding? What's so threatening about our own unfiltered mental activity that we need constant distraction to manage it? Often, it's the emergence of difficult emotions, unresolved conflicts, or existential questions that we're not ready to face. Silence allows these suppressed experiences to surface, and many of us have lost the capacity to be present with discomfort. There's also the fear of boredom, the anxiety that without external stimulation, we might discover that we're fundamentally uninteresting. We worry that our own thoughts aren't worth thinking, our own imagination isn't worth exploring, our own company isn't worth keeping. Distraction protects us from testing these assumptions. The irony is that this constant external stimulation actually diminishes our capacity for the very things we're seeking: creativity, insight, peace, authentic connection. These qualities emerge from stillness, reflection, and inner work. When we're always consuming others' thoughts, we have no space to develop our own. When we're always responding to external demands, we lose touch with internal guidance. Breaking the addiction to distraction requires recognizing it as an addiction. Like any dependency, it provides temporary relief while creating long-term problems. The relief comes from avoiding difficult emotions or existential questions. The problems include decreased attention span, reduced creativity, increased anxiety, and loss of self-connection. Recovery requires gradually increasing our tolerance for unstimulated consciousness. This might mean taking walks without podcasts, eating meals without screens, or simply sitting for a few minutes each day without any input other than our own awareness. These practices can feel excruciating at first, which reveals how dependent we've become on external stimulation. But as we develop the capacity to be present with ourselves without distraction, something remarkable happens. We begin to discover that our own minds are actually quite interesting. Our thoughts, when given space to develop naturally, often surprise us with their creativity and wisdom. Our emotions, when allowed to be felt fully, provide valuable information about our needs and values. We also discover that boredom isn't the enemy we thought it was. Boredom is often the precursor to creativity, the space where new ideas can emerge. It's the psychological equivalent of fallow ground, necessary for new growth. When we eliminate boredom from our lives, we also eliminate many opportunities for insight and innovation. The goal isn't to eliminate all external stimulation or to become hermits. It's to develop a conscious relationship with distraction rather than being unconsciously controlled by it. It's about choosing when to engage with external input and when to turn inward. It's about reclaiming our capacity for sustained attention and deep reflection. This work requires patience because the discomfort of undistracted consciousness is real. We've been avoiding it for good reasons. It can be scary, boring, or painful. But like any challenging practice, it becomes easier with time. And the rewards, increased self-awareness, enhanced creativity, greater emotional resilience, are worth the initial difficulty. The fear of your own potential. One of the most paradoxical aspects of our fear of solitude is that we're often not just afraid of discovering our limitations. We're equally afraid of discovering our potential. There's something deeply threatening about the possibility that we might be capable of more than we've allowed ourselves to express, that we might have talents we've never developed, dreams we've never pursued, or capacities we've never explored. This fear of our own greatness, what psychologist Abraham Maslow called the Jonah complex, can be more paralyzing than the fear of failure. When we glimpse our potential in moments of quiet reflection, we're faced with uncomfortable questions. If I'm capable of this, why haven't I pursued it? What would I have to give up to honor this calling? What would others think if I suddenly changed direction? Our potential often lies in directions that contradict the identity we've constructed or the path we've committed to. The successful lawyer discovers a passion for art. The devoted parent realizes they want to travel the world. The stable employee dreams of starting their own business. These discoveries can feel like betrayals of our previous choices and commitments. Society often reinforces this fear by punishing those who step outside conventional expectations. We're taught to be grateful for what we have rather than reaching for what's possible. We're encouraged to be realistic rather than visionary. We're told that dramatic changes are selfish, risky, or irresponsible. But perhaps the deepest source of this fear is the responsibility that comes with recognizing our potential. When we know we're capable of something, we can no longer pretend we're not. We can no longer blame circumstances, other people, or bad luck for our unfulfilled dreams. We become responsible for either pursuing our potential or choosing not to. This responsibility can feel overwhelming. It's much easier to live with the comfortable fiction that we're doing the best we can with what we have than to face the truth that we might be capable of much more. It's safer to stay in known limitations than to explore unknown possibilities. There's also the fear of success itself. What if we pursue our potential and actually achieve it? What if we become the person we're capable of being? This success might require leaving behind familiar identities, relationships, or lifestyles. It might mean disappointing people who preferred us as we were. It might mean facing new challenges and responsibilities we feel unprepared for. The fear of our potential is often intertwined with perfectionism. We become afraid to try because we might not excel immediately. We worry that our efforts won't meet our own standards or others' expectations, so we stay in safe territory where our competence is established rather than venturing into areas where we might struggle or fail. But potential isn't meant to be a burden. It's meant to be a gift. The capacities you discover in solitude aren't obligations to achieve certain outcomes. They're invitations to explore what's possible. They're opportunities to expand your experience of being alive, to contribute your unique gifts to the world, to become more fully yourself. Embracing your potential requires courage, but it also requires self-compassion. You don't have to pursue every possibility you discover. You don't have to be perfect at everything you attempt. You don't have to justify your choices to others. You simply have to be honest about what calls to you and gentle with yourself as you explore it. The tragedy isn't in having unused potential. We all have capacities we'll never fully develop. The tragedy is in being afraid to explore any of it. It's in living so defensively that we never discover what we're truly capable of. It's in dying with our music still inside us, as Wayne Dyer put it. When we find the courage to face our potential in solitude, something profound shifts. We stop seeing ourselves as fixed entities with predetermined limitations and start seeing ourselves as ongoing creations with unlimited possibilities. We stop asking, "Who am I?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming?" The gift of authentic solitude. What happens when we finally stop running from ourselves, when we find the courage to sit in genuine solitude without distraction, without masks, without the constant need for external validation? Something beautiful and transformative begins to emerge. Authentic solitude, which is qualitatively different from loneliness, isolation, or mere physical aloneness. Authentic solitude is a state of completeness rather than emptiness. It's characterized by presence rather than absence, fullness rather than lack. When we're authentically alone, we're not waiting for something else to make us whole. We're experiencing wholeness directly. We're not lonely for others because we've found genuine companionship with ourselves. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It requires patience, practice, and a willingness to sit with discomfort while our authentic self slowly emerges from beneath layers of conditioning and performance. But those who persist in this journey often describe it as coming home to themselves after years of living as refugees in their own lives. In authentic solitude, we begin to hear our own voice, not the voice that echoes others' opinions or tries to say what we think people want to hear, but the quiet, steady voice of our deeper wisdom. This voice has been speaking all along, but it's often drowned out by external noise and internal chatter. In stillness, we can finally hear it clearly. We also discover that we're actually quite interesting company. When we stop judging our thoughts and start simply observing them, we often find surprising creativity, humor, and insight. When we stop trying to control our emotions and start experiencing them fully, we discover their intelligence and information. When we stop performing and start being, we uncover a spontaneous authenticity that's more compelling than any act we could maintain. Authentic solitude becomes a sanctuary, a place we can retreat to for renewal, clarity, and perspective. Instead of something we endure, it becomes something we cherish. Instead of feeling like punishment, it feels like privilege. Instead of time to fill, it becomes time to savor. This doesn't mean becoming antisocial or preferring isolation to all human contact. Rather, it means developing the capacity to be genuinely alone so that when we choose to be with others, we're relating from wholeness rather than neediness. We're sharing our overflow rather than trying to fill our emptiness through others. People who have cultivated authentic solitude often report that their relationships actually improve. They no longer need others to complete them, so they can appreciate others for who they are rather than what they provide. They're less reactive, less demanding, less dependent. They can offer genuine love rather than disguised neediness. They also become more creative, more intuitive, more aligned with their authentic values. Without the constant input of others' opinions and expectations, they can hear their own wisdom more clearly. They make decisions based on inner knowing rather than external pressure. They pursue paths that feel true rather than paths that look good. Perhaps most importantly, they develop what might be called existential courage, the ability to face the fundamental questions of existence without needing immediate answers or external reassurance. They can sit with uncertainty, embrace mystery, and find meaning in the questions themselves rather than needing to solve them. This authentic solitude also connects us to something larger than ourselves. When we're no longer distracted by the small dramas of ego and social positioning, we can attune to the deeper currents of life. We might experience connection to nature, to creative inspiration, to spiritual dimensions of existence that are available only in stillness. The gift of authentic solitude is not just personal, it's cultural. In a world increasingly polarized by reactive tribalism and shallow connection, people who have developed genuine self-relationship offer something precious: the capacity for real dialogue, authentic presence, and deep listening. They can engage with others from a place of curiosity rather than defensiveness. They also model possibility for others who are still trapped in the prison of external validation and constant distraction. Their very presence demonstrates that another way of being is possible, that we don't have to live as strangers to ourselves, that we don't have to fear our own company, that solitude can be a choice rather than a punishment. The journey home to yourself. The path to authentic self-relationship is not a destination you arrive at, but a journey you commit to. It's the ongoing practice of choosing presence over distraction, authenticity over performance, inner knowing over external validation. It's the daily decision to turn toward yourself rather than away, to listen rather than silence, to accept rather than reject. This journey requires practical steps. It means creating regular opportunities for unstructured solitude, time that isn't filled with activities, goals, or inputs. It might be as simple as taking a daily walk without podcasts, sitting quietly with coffee in the morning, or spending time in nature without agenda. It also means developing the capacity to be present with difficult emotions, rather than immediately seeking distraction or numbing. When anxiety arises, instead of reaching for your phone, can you breathe with it? When sadness emerges, instead of pushing it away, can you listen to what it's telling you? When anger surfaces, instead of judging it, can you explore its message? The journey requires courage because you'll discover aspects of yourself that challenge your self-concept. You might find anger where you thought there was only kindness, fear where you believed there was confidence, or desires that contradict your supposed values. The practice is to meet these discoveries with curiosity rather than judgment. It also requires patience because authentic self-knowledge develops slowly. You're undoing years or decades of conditioning, performance, and avoidance. You're learning to recognize your own voice after it's been drowned out by others' opinions for so long. This takes time, and the process can't be rushed or forced. Self-compassion is essential because you'll make mistakes. You'll slip back into old patterns of self-avoidance, external validation, and performance. You'll judge yourself for being imperfect, then judge yourself for judging. The practice is to meet these inevitable lapses with kindness rather than criticism. As you develop this relationship with yourself, you might notice resistance from others. People who have grown accustomed to your availability, your people-pleasing, your willingness to prioritize their needs over your own might feel uncomfortable with your growing self-awareness and boundary setting. This resistance is normal and often indicates that you're moving in the right direction. You might also experience grief as you recognize how much of your life you've spent disconnected from yourself. This grief is appropriate and necessary. It's the natural response to acknowledging what you've lost while focusing on what you're gaining. Allow yourself to mourn the time spent as a stranger to yourself while celebrating the return home. The journey doesn't end with perfect self-knowledge or complete comfort with solitude. It's an ongoing relationship that deepens and evolves throughout your life. Like any important relationship, it requires attention, care, and commitment. But unlike external relationships, this one is guaranteed to last as long as you do. As this relationship deepens, you'll likely find that your fear of being alone transforms into appreciation for solitude. You'll discover that you're not empty or boring or unworthy of your own company. You'll realize that the person you were afraid to meet is actually quite remarkable, complex, interesting, capable of growth and change and contribution. You'll also discover that this inner relationship becomes the foundation for all other relationships. When you're not desperately seeking external validation, you can give and receive love more freely. When you're not afraid of your own thoughts and emotions, you can be present with others' inner experiences. When you know yourself, you can truly know others. The ultimate realization is that you were never actually alone. You've always had access to this companion, this witness, this source of wisdom and creativity and love. You just needed to stop running long enough to recognize the presence that was always there, waiting patiently for you to come home to yourself. You now stand at a crossroads that will determine the quality of the rest of your life. You can continue living as you have been, avoiding solitude, seeking external validation, performing for others' approval, staying distracted from your own inner experience. This path is familiar, socially acceptable, and requires no courage. It also guarantees that you'll remain a stranger to the most important person in your life, yourself. Or you can choose the path of authentic self-relationship, the journey toward knowing, accepting, and embracing who you actually are beneath all the masks and performances. This path is uncertain, sometimes lonely, and requires tremendous courage. It also offers the possibility of genuine fulfillment, authentic connection, and the deep satisfaction of living as yourself rather than as someone else's idea of who you should be. The choice isn't just about how you spend your alone time. It's about whether you'll live your entire life from the inside out or the outside in. Will you make decisions based on your own values or others' expectations? Will you pursue dreams that emerge from your authentic self or goals that look good to observers? Will you form relationships based on genuine compatibility or mutual performance? Understand that this choice has consequences. If you choose the path of authentic self-relationship, you might disappoint people who prefer you as you were. You might have to leave situations that no longer fit who you're becoming. You might have to face parts of yourself that challenge your comfortable self-concept. You might have to take responsibility for your own happiness rather than expecting others to provide it. But you might also discover capacities you never knew you had. You might find peace in your own company that you never thought possible. You might develop the ability to love others without needing them to complete you. You might create work, art, or contributions that emerge from your authentic self rather than your performing self. The fear of facing yourself isn't really about what you might discover. It's about what you might have to do with what you discover. It's about the responsibility that comes with self-knowledge, the changes that authentic living might require, the courage it takes to disappoint others while honoring yourself. But here's what I've learned from those who have made this journey. The person you're afraid to meet is not your enemy. The thoughts you're avoiding are not as terrible as you imagine. The emotions you're running from contain wisdom, not destruction. The solitude you fear holds gifts, not punishment. Your authentic self, the one waiting patiently beneath all the masks and performances, is not a stranger to be feared, but a friend to be welcomed home. This person has been with you all along, witnessing your struggles, celebrating your victories, holding space for your growth. They've been waiting for you to stop running and start listening. The loneliness you feel isn't caused by the absence of others. It's caused by your absence from yourself. The emptiness you try to fill with external stimulation isn't a void that needs to be filled. It's space that needs to be inhabited. The fear that grips you in silence isn't warning you of danger. It's announcing the possibility of transformation. So the question becomes, are you ready to stop being afraid of your own company? Are you willing to discover that the person you've been avoiding might actually be worth knowing? Can you find the courage to sit in silence long enough to hear what your own soul has been trying to tell you? The journey home to yourself begins with a single moment of stillness. Just one moment where you choose presence over distraction, curiosity over fear, self-compassion over self-judgment. One moment where you stop running and start listening. One moment where you remember that you are not your own enemy. You are your own greatest ally, waiting to be discovered. What you'll find there might surprise you. It might challenge you. It might change everything about how you see yourself and your life. But it won't destroy you. Instead, it might be the beginning of finally, truly living. If this message has stirred something in you, if you recognize yourself in this description of running from your own company, share your thoughts in the comments below. What are you most afraid of discovering about yourself? What keeps you reaching for distraction when silence calls? Your honesty might help others feel less alone in their own journey toward authentic self-relationship. And if you're ready to explore these themes more deeply, make sure to watch the next video where we'll dive into practical steps for developing a genuine relationship with yourself. The tools and practices that can help you transform fear of solitude into appreciation for your own remarkable company. Remember, the person you're most afraid to be alone with is the same person who holds the key to everything you're actually looking for. The question is whether you'll finally find the courage to meet them. Your authentic self is waiting. The choice of whether to show up is yours.